Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee. We're joined by Mr. Koretz and Mr. O'Farrell this afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and take public comment, including general public comment. We only have one item on the agenda today, so let's go ahead and get started. Adam Smith? John Motor? Are you here? Yep. Chris Roth? And Becky Denny? I think there's only two mics. Sorry about that. So the other two can come right after.
John,
you want to go ahead and start, Adam?
Sure. This is just general comment. We're not.
No, this is item number one.
Okay.
And did you want to speak on the general public comment as well?
Yeah, I mean, I put both in. Yeah.
Okay. So you get 2 minutes.
My name's Adam Smith. I'm an organizer with White People for Black Lives, and part of the Services Not Sweeps Coalition. We were here last week to speak on this issue, and I just, we know that it's being fast-tracked so that it can be through full council on Friday. After today, I know that it's been bounced from agendas on the Budget and Finance Committee and the Homelessness and Poverty Committee, so I just wanted to come back and restate that how important it is that that LAPD is taken off of these any of these cleanup teams. It's really distracting when no one's listening. I go to Mr. Koretz's district. I go to Mr. Bonan's district a lot, and help people move their stuff before encampment sweeps. Film the police if they're acting out of hand, and I think even when the police aren't doing any type of actual enforcement, it gives power to the sanitation workers to mess with people because they know that the police have their back and are standing behind them. In the proposal, I noticed that the bin is being expanded, and if we're to trust, well, not trust, but if we're supposed to believe that the enforcement's actually being taken out, why is the bin being expanded? Because that only means that more people's stuff is going to be confiscated. So we don't want any more enforcement. We don't want 5611. No cops and sweeps. They aren't outreach workers. They're not social workers. They're not mental health workers. CARE and CARE Plus are just acronyms if there's still police involved.
Thank you. Next speaker, are you John?
Yeah.
You speaking on item one in general public comment?
Correct, yes.
Go ahead.
I'm John Motter with Ground Game LA and the Services Not Sweeps Coalition, and I'm here to reiterate that police need to be taken out of any kind of homeless outreach. This whole proposal came about from the pressure of community organizations across the city that we've been putting on the city for Services Not Sweeps. And our key demand is to take police out of any kind of homeless outreach or any kind of encampment cleanups that would affect unhoused people. And this is completely absent from there. In fact, there are points that would include increased police surveillance of unhoused and low-income communities that would end up criminalizing them even further. This has always been a demand of homeless advocates and of the coalition to take police out of homeless outreach. This is something even the police say whenever we talk to them, when we're monitoring their cleanups, that they don't want to have anything to do with homelessness and don't want to be conducting outreach. That never seems to make its way up to Chief Moore and the brass, but anytime I've spoken to an officer on a sweep, they always try and say, well, I don't want to be here. Yeah, you're right, I'm not a social worker. Cops don't belong on these teams. They only further traumatize people. Recently, one of my unhoused neighbors, it was an elderly disabled woman. She had her tent destroyed. She couldn't move it in time. I mean, she couldn't move it at all. She's disabled. And when she was out going to buy another tent, her son came up to me because she had been out all night. He couldn't find her. I called Department of Mental Health. They said to call the police to go find her. So the very same people, the whole reason she was even out and missing was because her tent was destroyed, and then I'm supposed to ask the police, who had just traumatized her, to go find her and track her down and try and bring her back. That's unacceptable.
Thank you. Next, Chris, Becky?
Hi, my name is Chris Roth with Ground Game Los Angeles. I just wanted to reiterate the same points that are being made by both Adam and John relating to the absolute necessity that the police are not playing a part in any of these, any kind of interactions that we're having with the police when it comes to the delivering of any services. They are not equipped for it. Their presence there escalates the situation needlessly. It causes further harm to populations of folks who are already living through an incredibly stressful, dehumanizing experience. Having an officer show up who is wearing a full set of body armor with a pistol on one hip and a taser on the other does nothing to help assure the person that they are going to be able to receive, that they're going to trust the folks who are doing the actual outreach to receive help, because they're intimidated, they're terrified, they're angry because things are being taken from them. Again, there's the story that keeps coming up from Koreatown, where one of the folks that we've done outreach to as part of K-Town for All, his mother's ashes were taken from him. And having the police there to remind him of what the trauma was that he went through during that process of losing those cherished belongings is not going to be of any help with these services. We need to make sure that the police don't play a part, that the folks who are there that are interacting with our unhoused population are equipped to do so, are trained to do so, and understand how to get them into a truly beneficial process of actually being housed, of actually receiving the support that they need from mental health services, supportive housing. The bridge housing needs to be dramatically expanded and allow people to actually stay in it during the day, along the lines of what you would get with permanent supportive housing. The emphasis on services, not on sweeps, is I'm glad to see that there's some traction being made on this, but we need to make sure that the cops play no part in outreach to our unhoused population.
Thank you. Becky?
Hi, I'm Becky Dennison with Venice Community Housing. We're an affordable and supportive housing provider on the west side. Though we have always long time been involved in the civil rights of folks living on our streets and sidewalks as well, because we simply cannot solve this problem fast enough, and people are on our streets and sidewalks for longer and longer, which is why we were part of the Services Not Sweeps Coalition and a part of preparing the platform that we think the report reflects a large majority of our platform, which is why we are generally supportive of it. But just also want to reiterate the pieces that are of concern. There is enforcement remaining in the report. Enforcement and a public health and a humane approach just do not go hand in hand. And then the report is just silent on the police. And so we would really ask that this committee and the council be very clear that this includes a removal of LAPD from these teams. I just want to add a little piece about, sometimes people try to involve the police and just do it through training, and people have talked about using trauma-informed care training with the police. Those two things also do not go hand in hand. As service providers, as housing providers, when we're implementing trauma-informed care, it involves the entire change in all of our policies and procedures, and for people to have the power, and that's just not the case with the institution of LAPD. So they just don't match. So we hope that you will move the great things in this report forward that reflect our platform and clarify the concerning things, and particularly ensure that the police are removed from these teams. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speakers are Adam Rice, Lynn Wong, and Vicky Kirschenbaum. Is Vicky here? Adam, go ahead.
Well, I would first off like to echo.
Hold on for just a second. So you're only speaking on this item, right?
This general public comment.
That's not what my tablet says. So can you guys update my tablet, please? I want to make sure I give you the right time.
Right on.
So 2 minutes, one for the item and one for general public comment. Go ahead.
Okay, right on.
Just want to make sure I'm following the rules.
Adam Rice from Los Angeles.
I'm sorry. These tablets.
It's
looks
all right,
like you only
Councilman.
signed up for general public comment, so you're not speaking on item number one.
I am. I thought
You
that.
want to speak on item number
Yes,
one? Okay,
yes,
so
ma'am.
Can you update the tablet to reflect that he wants to speak on general public comment and item number one? Go ahead, Adam.
Right. So, Adam Rice from the Los Angeles Community Action Network and the Services Not Sweeps Coalition. As we came and spoke to you last week, we do back a lot of the things in this proposal, because there are things that we've been pushing for well over a decade and a half. One of the main things we have been pushing for well over that decade and a half is the removal of police as social workers. A 40-hour mental health training is not enough to be able to deal with some of the things that the needs of people on the street. I have more mental health training than that. Okay? We're required to do that, to do the work that we do in outreach. The police do not belong on outreach teams, and I'll give you an example why. Who here remembers Eric Ocaño? Eric Ocaño was a homeless man who climbed to the top of a billboard on 5th and San Pedro. And instead of deploying mental health workers to help talk him down, the police shot him off that billboard and killed him, trying to play some game of circus. They swore that he would land on the inflatable mat. Instead, he hit the concrete and died. Charlie Quinang, same spot, 5th and San Pedro, was accosted by 5 officers, told them repeatedly, "I have mental health issues." When he retreated into his tent to try to get away from the situation, they dragged him by his ankles, started beating on him. He started fighting back. Apparently, these officers, even though they outnumbered him 5-1, could not subdue him. So while he was on the ground and they were tasing him, they shot him in the back 5 times. That is how police interactions with homeless people in Los Angeles work. The police need to be removed from all interactions with the homeless in LA.
Lynn Wong, hold on for just a second. So it looks like you only filled out for general public comment. What do you want to speak on?
I also wanted to speak on agenda item.
Okay, so when you're done, can you make sure you go back to the kiosk and add item number 1?
Yes, thank you.
Vicky, you want to come up? You also, it looks like you only signed up for general public comment.
Just public comment, not the agenda.
Got it, okay. Go ahead, Lynn.
Okay. So I want to point out that environmental justice is about decommodifying the basic means of survival. That means free access to sanitation, public toilets, and washing stations, not cleanup cops, not cleanup teams and cops. If you ask anyone what the biggest threat to public health is, it's not vagrancy or poverty, it's uncontrolled human waste. And that, more than anything else, is a policy choice. As long as the alternative to sweeps includes policing as a central component to outreach, it will always be a hostile and violent way to solve this problem. The police don't have any place in this process. Dignity and respect comes first, not as an afterthought, and the police prevents that from happening. Any services that don't prioritize the dignity and human rights of houseless people may as well be delivered at gunpoint. And that is not environmental justice. If you want environmental justice, you will put kindness and empathy first when addressing what is a humanitarian crisis. I will also add that there are genuine reasons for us to be revisiting the idea of public sanitation and an infrastructure that serves everybody regardless of economic standing, because we need to recognize that the sewage system in Los Angeles is also hugely vulnerable to a seismic event. If we want to adequately prepare for this kind of thing for all of our citizens, we should start with our most vulnerable citizens and implement infrastructure that is independent of sewage, that is free of charge, and that is maintainable without huge capital expenditures so that we can have a baseline of preparation if the worst does happen for the city. And we know that we are overdue. And by neglecting the human rights of houseless people, not only are we criminalizing the basic act of shitting, but we are also shooting ourselves in the ass when we are inevitably faced with a huge disruptive disaster that shuts down our natural infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Vicky?
Hi, yes, public comment.
1 minute for general public comment.
Okay. I attended the Burbank Water and Power Board meeting a few days ago, and the presentation went into great detail on how LADWP is justifying investing in repowering the Intermountain Power Project as a gas plant, 840 megawatts, with a 50-year contract. And the justification would be that LA says it will switch to using emissions-free hydrogen generated by renewables by 2035. That was in the slides we were shown. Never heard this before. I believe only one plant exists in the world and has a gas engine. It's in Italy and produces 12 megawatts. So I am really skeptical. I urge you to continue to demand that LA invest in solar, wind, battery storage, the proven technologies we have today, not long-term gas and not pie-in-the-sky hydrogen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public speakers on either general public item or item number 1? Did you fill out your name outside in the kiosk? Your name's not on here. Okay, you want to come up? You might want to do that again because your name's not popping up on the. Yeah. Who else wants to speak? You want to speak on item number 1? You state your names. Do you want to state your name?
Annika?
Okay, go ahead.
1 minute.
Are you speaking
1
on item
minute's
number 1?
fine.
Yeah.
1 minute's fine. Okay. I also wanted to add that the presence of the police during cleanups further criminalizes encampment residents. The community would be better served by a public health model that promotes long-term stability. So if the idea is that we're trying to get people to better opportunities and eventually to housing, then it doesn't make sense that the police are there because it just promotes an environment of instability and like perpetuates trauma for this community. So thank you.
All right. Your name again?
Annika Ford.
Okay, just do me a favor when you're done. Can you just make sure your name's in the kiosk?
Yeah.
For the record. What's your name?
Gabriela Vasquez,
Okay. Speaking on item number 1 as well?
item number 1.
ahead.
I'm a law student, born and raised here in Los Angeles. I've gotten the opportunity to work with a lot of folks in outreach and I see what's going on in these encampments. I'm happy to hear that LA Sanitation is moving towards a regularized delivery of hygiene and trash receptacles. That's something that can easily be implemented, and I'm glad that's in this proposal, and a lot of that comes from hard work that LA CAN has been doing. I also urge the city to end the presence of police during these cleanups. I've seen how traumatizing that is for folks. People have not wanted to clear away their things because they're scared of the police, and I think that their presence is not what is needed anymore. Lastly, I do urge the City Council to rescind ordinances 5611 and 4118D because they solely have been used to criminalize homeless people in our community. These are our neighbors. They deserve services, not sweeps. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you also, Sergeant, can you help her input her name in the kiosk outside? What is your name?
Luis Virgen?
Okay. You want to speak on item number 1?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I also fully support the plan that you guys are going to pass pretty soon, I hope. And I personally have seen the flaws in alley sanitation sweeps, and they're inconsistent. They have too much, alley sanitation has too much discretionary power, and again, they don't have a real method or process to determine what is waste and what is not. So I'm urging the city council to input a method that would provide alley sanitation to determine what is waste and what is not. We need something that is similar to parking restrictions, not just something that's posted on a wall or a pole. That's just a flimsy paper that could be ripped off. They need sufficient notice to remove their things. And with all due respect, City Council, they need more than 15 minutes to pick up their home because I don't know for you, but for me, it would take a lot more than 15 minutes to pick up everything I have in my home.
Thank you. Do you also mind putting your name in the kiosk outside so the record can reflect that you spoke today? Is there anyone else who has not filled out their name outside of the kiosk? Lin Wong, I think you already spoke. Your name is popping up again. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close. Oh, there's 2 more? Oh, they're just Annika Ford and Gabriela Vasquez, right? Okay. Thank you very much for doing that. There are no more speakers on this item, and I'm going to go ahead and close general public comment as well. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 1. So colleagues, last week sanitation provided an overview of this new deployment proposal, and before we move this forward to the City Council, I wanted sanitation to provide an update on some of the questions that we had last week. So if you want to go ahead and come up, Mr. Saldivar, with your team as well. And I'm going to go ahead and read there was 5 pending questions that we had asked that you provided an update here today. So if I can, just so that we can refresh our memories, let me just go down the list. You were going to brief all council offices and discuss a proposal with various departments, including LAPD. 2, provide a clear outline of the funding request. 3rd, report on Mr. O'Farrell's request to move his deployment center from Washington Street to San Fernando Road, which is closest to his district. 4, it was report on a feasibility of using public facilities to provide temporary housing. And the last thing we've asked you to do is the CAO to review the funding request as well. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. What is the status of briefing the council offices in meeting with other departments, Mr. Saldivar?
We made great progress, Madam Chair. Enrique Saldivar, Director and General Manager of LA Sanitation and Environment. We have made great progress. We have briefed the majority of the council offices from last week to this week. We have 4 pending briefings. One is scheduled for tomorrow, and we believe all of the 15 will be done, with the exception of one that will be done in July. But we have made incredible progress in being able to get on everyone's calendar. 4 are pending.
Okay.
4 districts are pending. 1 is tomorrow, and then 3, the other remaining.
All right. The other thing we had a question about, so the deployment plan is silent on LAPD, and though I will agree that we don't need to militarize our approach, I am concerned about the safety of our workers. And so can you speak about, has there ever been an instance in which workers have been injured or they're concerned for their safety? Can you speak to that?
Yes, we have had incidents where our workers have been threatened. In some cases, there have been some assaults, and we have to be mindful of that.
So how have your conversations with LAPD, how are those going?
So one of the instructions you also, as you said, Madam Chair, is that we coordinate with the LAPD for the protection of the workers and the safety. That those have been going well. There's a new commander that has been appointed for this particular program, Commander Graham.
Right here.
Commander Graham.
Graham, did you want to say anything? You weren't prepared to speak, I understand that, but do you want to introduce yourself?
Members of the committee, good afternoon. I'm Donald Graham. I'm the new homeless coordinator for the department. We have met in person. We've spoken on the phone, and we are putting together a plan for the review for the chief of police, but we are ready to support the Department of Sanitation.
Okay. Thank you. Lisa, I did have some questions for you, though. I was hoping you could provide clarity on the funding request in the report. So can you quickly run through and explain the funding out of the UB, but also what funding have you identified for the overtime request? Has that been figured out?
Sure. Lisa Mowry, Chief Financial Officer, LA Sanitation and Environment. So there were 3 of the report recommendations related to the UB. Item 4 had to do with LA Sanitation's direct cost, and that would be $4.785 million of the amount in the UB. This would be related to sanitation salaries, uniforms, equipments, operating supplies. The second, report recommendation number 5 is related to the amount from the UB, $990,000, which would reimburse sanitation for the use of our equipment. When these teams are first launched, we won't have the equipment that will go along with them, so we will be utilizing sanitation vehicles that have been purchased by our special funds. So essentially, the general fund will be leasing the vehicles for this purpose.
Okay.
Recommendation number 6 is related to the related cost associated with the new staff for this program, pension and healthcare costs, and that's $693,000. So that fully allocates the $6,468,000 that was line 10 in the unappropriated balance in the budget. Our other recommendation in there, which was split into 2 recommendations, 2A and 2B, had to do with continuing the overtime surge that we've been doing this past month. In order to carry that forward for the next 3 months until the new teams are in place, we had 2 recommendations. One would involve our existing teams working 10 hours per week, and then the other would be 18 hours per week, which would be...
And would that go into effect in July?
The intent would be...
July through October?
Yeah, the intent for that would be July, August, and September, so for that 3-month period. Of these two amounts, the 10 hours of overtime a week is about 1.4 million. The full 18 hours per week, which would be extending every day by 2 hours, taking advantage of the longer days, as well as working on Saturday, which is $2.6 million. So we've identified $900,000 worth of that, a combination of some savings sanitation expects to realize within this current fiscal year, as well as some encumbered funds from prior fiscal years from 16-17 and 17-18 related to subsidy amounts related to the sanitation bills for low income and lifeline customers, which all of those payments have cleared, so these would be excess amounts. We've been working very closely with the CAO. They're going through and confirming that. We've also identified some potential additional funds. So we're hoping that we'll continue to work with the CAO. Hopefully we can identify the full $2.6 million before Friday when this item is scheduled to go to full council.
Okay. Is there anyone here from the CAO's office that can confirm the funding available? I just want to make sure that maybe we can ensure that the report is submitted to the file ASAP to make sure that you agree that the funding's available for this.
Sarai Baga from the CAO's office. We are working with sanitation, and we expect to be able to provide a report in advance of the Friday council.
Okay.
So we'll continue to work with them.
To be submitted with the file. That would be...
To catch up to the file.
Okay, great. But you think you can meet that deadline?
Yes.
Thank you. The other question, I don't want to... This is not something I brought up, Mr. O'Farrell. I just wanted to make sure that your question was answered, your request, I should say, on the deployment of a center for his district to be moved from a farther location to a closer one. I don't know if you want to speak to that or if that's been addressed.
I believe it has been addressed, and we could also hear from Mr. Saldivar right now to confirm that, but I feel that you have made the move. My only question is the San Fernando Road location. I believe it was still in development, but we're secure that by October we'll have the capacity to move the dedicated care team to service the 13th district. The space will be available.
Correct. That's our pledge to you.
And we'll get there, yes.
That by October we will make the room.
That includes moving one Care Plus team as well.
That includes moving one Care Plus team as well.
That's fair. And
satisfies
it does. I mean, we're just minutes away from the CD13 boundary as opposed to 30, 45 minutes in traffic with the other locations. So I just think it'll be a lot more efficient. So I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Well, one or the other?
Hold on for just a second, Mr. Cedillo. Let's reflect the record. Let the record reflect that Mr. Cedillo has now joined us. I will open it for questions. Did you want to start, Mr. Cedillo?
Just for my dear colleague, if this was an either-or proposition for yourself, because I looked at the map and I don't know if you want to keep both.
You know something?
I know exactly that will be our Hoover to Alvarado up.
Right.
And that's a distance, but I don't know if you want to preclude that from the one in Cypress Park. Cypress Park is one that's obviously almost adjacent.
Right. It's the old Kia dealership.
Why can't you do two?
And it's just,
and
I think that if we do two, it doesn't work with the deployment. And really, the Washington Boulevard one is so far from the 13th district boundary, but the San Fernando Road is so close. I mean, we're just literally 2 minutes away, and you're in the Glassell Park section of my district, and then just across, we're just close in general.
No, I'm just because we share borders both in the north and in the south.
And actually, Mr. Cedillo, I actually think that this will go along
off-ramp and Temple.
Especially with the Care Plus team. I think it'll go further for both of our districts. I think to have that additional resource on San Fernando Road.
Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah. So,
that's absolutely.
I appreciate the courtesy to think about the other location, but I think the other location is just too far.
And I have a recommendation to address this, which I'll read into the record. But Mr. Cedillo, did you have any other questions?
Well, just that I had questions on our last meeting, Madam Chair, and so I was wondering the thought or the response on the concerns I'd raised about this being homelessness being a problem that goes beyond 9 to 5, and what thoughts you had on taking this longer, a 24-hour operation. I'd raised a lot of questions about the restrooms because I just had some stakeholder meetings yesterday in the kind of northeast part of my district. Huge concern. The restrooms are a huge concern. and what you've thought about making them operational. Unfortunately, the state thinks it's a good idea to lock up their restrooms at their state park, at both of them, at both sites. I told them I didn't agree with them. I think the better approach is to have them open, particularly in the later hours, to have those open and to have them staffed. Seems to be a resource. The cost of staffing is a lot less than building or purchasing or leasing the restrooms that are now being discussed.
Yes, and we agree with the concept, Councilman, that there be restrooms when they're needed, not when we're there, and which is 24/7. We had approached this deployment strictly at the street level with a re-engineering of our field presence during our cleanups. We know that the strategy is much larger than that, and that we want to be part of the discussion and the solutions team on the 24/7 availability. And the deployment addressed only the street. We believe that we begin with the time that we're there during the cleanup, the Care Plus, that with the right kind of support that the council believes that this can become and should become more of a longer hours, not just when we're there during cleanup. We would be prepared to also graduate into that. And then the ultimate, which would be what you're saying, which is making use of existing physical facilities, whether it's a building that has them, or a park, or any other public or private building for that matter, that we need to also pursue that. Our deployment only limited itself to the street aspect of it, but we are prepared to also engage in the other strategies.
Okay, is that it? Good. Mr. Karatz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know there's a few problems that we haven't seemed to resolve yet. One is a difficulty in differentiating between possessions and trash. Have we come up with a best practices set to do that? And have we done the training of our sanitation staff that are actually out there having to make those decisions to make sure they do those as intelligently as possible?
Yes, we have had the training. The discerning of one type or the other is around what may present a risk to public health. Our folks don't like taking anything any more than anybody else. It's always a difficult thing for any one of the ones who make that determination, but it's based on whether an item has, as an example, a matter that can decompose or create any kind of bacteria issue. Those are removed for the purpose of public health protection. So the trained eyes are our environmental officers who make that determination in the field.
So we still get complaints of things like people's relatives' ashes being thrown away, which have to look a lot like trash. So how do you avoid those kinds of things from happening?
And it goes to the core of this new rethinking of how we are perceived. And it's important that folks do understand and believe that we are only taking stuff that is a public health risk and anything else that is legally permissible, but not where we are indiscriminately removing items. So we have work to do on the building of trust, which is why this deployment plan.
And when we look at the trust issue, there are a number of homeless people that don't trust the LAPD for whatever reasons, and they find them intimidating. So on the other hand, if we completely eliminate LAPD from the process, I don't know how comfortable all of our sanitation workers will feel and how safe they will feel. So where are we on that continuum, and how do we find an appropriate medium?
I think it's important to make clear that the contact point is first and foremost is LASA, and I think we all know that LASA will be doing the outreach. We know that because we do have a service interface. I mean, we're in the service front. That's where engendering the trust is important. That we will be interfacing with the homeless community. LA Sanitation and Environment. LAPD will not be interfacing in the direct outreach. That's clear in this deployment plan. LAPD will be providing public safety protection.
But again, how do you deal with the two issues that are conflicting, where just having a uniformed LAPD officer creates a certain amount of nervousness among some folks and may lead to confrontations, whereas if they're not there at all, there's some danger to sanitation workers.
Well, I think it's important to realize that, let's say it's 220 of our workers, and those who are directly in the front providing the service. We obviously, as the managers in sanitation, have an incredible sense of responsibility in that regard. I think it's extremely important that we also recalibrate our presence in the field with LAPD, but to say that we LA San workers don't need some level of protection, I'm not prepared to say that.
No, and I'd agree with you. So what I'm trying to get at is how are we recalibrating that relationship so there's perhaps less interaction between the homeless folks and LAPD?
I mean, I can tell you that Commander Graham is determined and committed to also changing that image. I mean, it's just like we are re-engineering our service front. No LAPD, in particular, Commander Graham is committed to changing that. And, maybe he can speak to it directly himself, but, they will be on the team. They'll be in the background, but, I mean, he wants LAPD to not be perceived as that. So he will do things along those lines.
And of course, we all, I think, feel that way too. We want to change that perception. What do we think the timing is of cleanups currently? What are we thinking now as opposed to our current 45-day cycle? Having looked at this for a while, what do you think the current cycle will be?
With the new deployment plan, we will have as you know, a dedicated care team. So that will be entirely dedicated to each council office, and the cycle of locations, that'll be determined clearly with the details with the council district office, and we will have far more capacity to have additional service days overall. So the frequency obviously will be reduced in how often we come to a location. We know that we have 2 new focus service zones that will remove a lot of the strain on the system. Grand Avenue Flower Corridor, that was a pool, an incredible pool on all the availability for the teams under our current model, as well as the extended downtown LA. So there will be a lot more service days available that will be driven by demand in coordination with your council office and the UHRC.
And is there any consideration at all in terms of restroom facilities of, rather than going the most expensive route, going the least expensive route and renting an Andy Gump style porta potty and not staffing it, but at least as opposed to using the bushes and the sidewalks and everything else. I'm wondering if we're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, and whether, instead of paying, $300,000 plus, we could be paying, $10,000 a year for porta potty facilities that provide essentially the same service, can be cleaned weekly, and done without the great expense.
I think, as Councilmember Cedillo also alluded to, the entire, access to sanitation and hygiene facilities is a discussion we need to really continue to have. To what extent a model like that should be sort of the beginning of the minimus that we should be able to do. In our deployment plan, we want to test some of those ideas. Just like the hygiene center, we say, let us demonstrate that this can really work, that then can build confidence for a larger, more robust deployment. Same thing with the less expensive kind of model. Pepe, I know you have been thinking about that particular question that the councilman just asked.
Yes, today we had a demo on a Class C, which is at a maintenance labor capacity, doesn't require a commercial driving license. So it's a small Andy Gump type unit that would provide not only the capability of that Andy Gump system, but also the power washing, steam cleaning. We're also testing out the ozone component to provide that sterilization of any encampment that we come across, to provide a more in-depth service, cleaner service, deodorizing, eliminating the tackiness and the smell and those things that go associated with that. So to Enrique's point, that we could evolve into a sanitation built-in Andy Gump type service where we model this out, I think it's for the future. I think it could work out. Reservations operationally is the unattended portion of it, but we would have to figure out how we work that into the system, and how we partner with folks that would maintain and attend that. And what I mean by the maintenance would be the availability of water for the hand wash and soap and toilet paper and so on, that could easily, without being attended, be another point of
if it runs out, to replenish.
Inappropriate maintenance. And so building all those things in, I think that we could grow into that. Initially, we had tested this unit for the RV component that we kind of discussed providing that service. But this unit could facilitate multiple things and multitask throughout the cleaning efforts, and just leave a more sanitized, cleaner product when we leave an encampment.
Well, even the most basic would be better than what we are dealing with now. So I would like to see us do something.
Entertain something as soon as we're going to rent one of these units to see how it works with the RV. I think that we could test out and acquire a few porta potties and see how we can manage those and test it out. I think it's worth looking at. I know that Councilman O'Farrell, you have the pit stop. I saw that in action out there.
We have 4.
Without the attendance component of it, it could, but we'll have to figure out how we.
During the day, yeah.
We'll have to figure that out. We'll work together and we'll explore how we can manage it with the current budget.
And one other thing I know, probably the closest thing to a homeless crisis that we had last was in the early 90s. And I believe that LA provided some public spaces for overnight sleeping. I know West Hollywood certainly did. So I recall hearing, I don't know if this is correct, that at Councilmember Yaroslavsky's suggestion, we even had some people sleeping in City Hall for a time. I'm wondering if we have looked at that, if we've looked at park meeting rooms and such, and if we looked at whether we could provide the adequate sanitation and to make that work.
We haven't looked at the public spaces or any other space for additional beds or overnight beds and what have you. But we definitely want us to LA San to be equipped and ready for when the council makes any kind of policy decision direction that we can support it from the public health sanitation point of view. That I can tell you we're gearing up toward.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Farrell, did you have anything else?
No, just, I think we had that discussion about moving the deployment of the CD13 care team and then one Care Plus team to the San Fernando yard. Yeah,
We'll do that.
There aren't.
I have-
Yeah, Mr. Padilla.
Well, I want to go back to this question of deployment in the LAPD. The testimony we heard last week was that the mere presence of the LAPD seemed inflammatory, that there were people who were very objectionable about that. It is what it is. I'm not interested in the causes. I'm looking at this scenario. On the other hand, in the first district, we covered their presence. We covered their presence in MacArthur Park, where we're organizing street vendors. We covered their presence in Chinatown. We covered their presence up in Highland Park. We love their presence. We like to see them walking the beat, etc. So it just seems that we're talking about a deployment question. On the other hand, it seems that community groups, because there seems part of this conversation has a presumption of risk in terms of dealing with the homelessness. There are community groups that have, as they would say, street cred. You can talk to community groups and they can work with you, and we could probably a lot cheaper than LAPD's costs, and have them work with us and with you in terms of executing this plan. As being the attendants, being the people who can help with their expertise make the distinctions of what is trash and what is a valuable letter or whatever the situation is that Mr. Koretz was raising. They would seem to know and have that expertise and would seem to have an ability to work with us. They offered that last week, or the last time we met. I don't understand why we would not pursue that. I raised that question last time in our last meeting, that we should engage and have a constructive conversation with the community groups that have the street cred, that are willing to join us and partner with us on this. And then we could redeploy LAPD in other areas, i.e. the first district, where they are welcomed and their presence plays a very constructive and positive role. And we have not developed that type of per se, on its face, inflammatory relationship.
Well, with regards to engaging with community groups, as you said, I know the committee did approve at the last hearing engaging in the Skid Row downtown area with one such community group, and that's one of the instructions that already came out of your committee. There's a larger conversation about growing that in a big way. That involves the Workforce Development Department. It involves a whole lot of other parties, and the conversations with the labor partners, and so that everyone has a consensus, and we're working on that. We're part of that. We started our labor management discussions last week since following the committee. So those are ongoing, and we want the discussion to lead in that direction, where there's an engagement of a larger network of community groups that complement what we do. The expertise on making the determination of public health risk, we're fine there. We're fine. We have the expertise, and we're very comfortable with making that decision. That is our mission.
Right.
Public health and the environment. So that's perfectly fine. With regards to the public safety, I think we need to be afforded the time to consider other alternatives.
Is that it for questions? All right, thank you. I have about a page and a half of instructions, so bear with me. All right. I'm going to move to approve the recommendations in the June 14th report from LA San with the following amendments. Recommendation 1A, add the following instruct LA Sanitation to work with any affected council offices for changes to deployment yards or other efficiencies that may be identified. Recommendation 1C, add the following: to instruct LA San to develop and report in 30 days on strategies and implementation schedule for the Sepulveda Basin in coordination with RAP and LASA, the bridges and underpasses of the Pacoima and Tahunga Wash within residential areas such as Arleta and Sun Valley, addressing the issues associated with RVs, particularly in the industrial areas of the San Fernando Valley. Recommendations 2, replace the following: that the City Council approve the initial increase in LA San's General Fund 1090 salaries overtime appropriation in the amount of $900,000 and reappropriate any uncommitted balance from the General Fund in LA San's fiscal year 2018-2019 or previous year's budget in Fund 100, Department 82, into LA San's fiscal year 2019 and 20, Fund 100, Department 82, Appropriation Unit 1090, salaries overtime. Does that make sense? You got that? Okay. Instruct LA San to provide the Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee with a monthly recap on the progress and effectiveness of this effort, including LASA and the CAO's homeless coordinators' efforts and the relationship and coordination with LA San's new deployment plan. That status of filing the 47 positions and the establishment and deployment of the new teams created. The tonnage of waste collected during the months of July, August, September enhanced deployment efforts. The tonnage of waste collected by the CARE and CARE Plus teams under the new deployment model proposed. To review of the conditions of streets and alleyways, including the prioritization of locations by proximity to schools and libraries. The progress made towards reducing the number of size of encampments, including coordinated efforts by LASA for appropriate service provisions and support, and report on any incidents of physical altercations or injuries to our employees. And last, the Council filed 10/0960, adopt the Energy and Environment, Climate Change and Environmental Justice Committee report dated June 18th of this year. Is that clear? Okay, I have no objections to any of that?
objections.
Okay, thank you very much. So move.
Thank
Meeting
you.
is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.